And I want to bring this story in. I like to talk about this story. But when I was in seminary and had a professor and we were doing a case study on the death penalty, I was so opposed to it. And I wrote my case study in opposition to the death penalty. He said then, and this was back in the early 2000s, probably 2007, 8, somewhere around there, he said, you're only against the death penalty because you haven't experienced a close relative or loved one that has been murdered or, something that has happened to them. I said, I believe that I would be against the death penalty even if that happened. Unfortunately, it did happen, and I'm still against the death penalty, but there was a 2-week period, I will let you know and be open and honest about it, that even though I was against the death penalty prior, in the 2 weeks after my son was murdered, there was a retaliation murder for someone because my son was set up to be murdered. And one of the young men was murdered as well. And I was like, good, because I was so very angry. And it took me saying good like that. And I was like, who is this person? I couldn't understand who I was at the time. And so what I did was I had to think about that. When you say you had to have a come to Jesus meeting, I had to have a come to Jesus meeting and say, I don't believe I just said that. I ended up going to this young man's prayer vigil and was praying because there is at no point that I want another mother, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, grandparent to feel the way that I felt when my son was murdered, and how I know my other children feel.
So,
because
I was for the death penalty prior to my dad being murdered. And I'm really glad that you asked this question, Jennifer, because I think it's important that we talk about our journeys in getting to that point. And for me, I feel like that I was kind of passively conditioned with secondhand or thirdhand information about capital punishment, much that you alluded to before, in that we have this misconception that we think it's swift, that we think it's effective, and we think it's a reasonable form of justice. And what changed me, obviously, with my dad being killed, that was the beginning of the impact. But what changed me was as I started to research the factual information surrounding the death penalty while I was going through the trial. Another part of it that I think is critical to mention is I wanted my father's killer dead, and I didn't care how that was facilitated. I had so much hate in my heart that it could have killed me. It could have completely consumed me as an individual, and I'm just very lucky that there was a convergence of circumstances that allowed me to try and find another way. And obviously that's led me all the way to today, where I am with folks who are fighting against the death penalty. And then, I would describe the trial process as unnecessary, hellish, and brutal. I mean, the cycle of trauma is perpetuated by having to go through that process. Wounds are reopened, and we're forced to face immense pain and sorrow. And as far as justice is concerned, no, I wouldn't call what happened justice, at least not in my opinion.
Before Jennifer was murdered, I was an anti-death penalty activist. My public ventures started in 1986 when I was a pastor in Missouri, and I would stand outside the state penitentiary where executions were scheduled, and I would stand with religious workers from Catholic traditions and other church traditions and people of goodwill who would just protest executions outside the prison. But prior to that, I was shaped by Christian traditions that emphasized not only accountability, but grace and mercy. and the possibility that human lives can be transformed by God. So the people who've done the things that hurt us and angered us the most could be transformed. After all, Moses, a murderer, transformed. David, a murderer, transformed. Saul, a murderer, transformed. So I believed in the gospel of transformation and also liberation and justice. But let's say the person were found and given death, that would not have served our family at all. It wouldn't have helped us grieve. It wouldn't have helped us to be restored. It wouldn't have helped us arrive at wholeness. It just would have been a continuation of the cycle of death that consumed my sister.